opinion on Sky News Australia starts now. This is Outsiders.
Good morning and smile and wave hand in the air. Welcome to Outsiders, the show that is to pause what woke identity politics and lefty lunacy are to pause what President Joe Biden is to pause auto cues.
4 more years, pause.
4 more years, pause. 4 more years, pause.
Turn and look at Rita and smile.
Smile back. Thanks, Rowan. Pause. But it's not the first time Joe has done a Ron Burgundy and simply read the auto cue instructions, point at the camera.
It is noteworthy that the percentage of women who register to vote and cast a ballot is consistently higher than the percentage of the men who do so. End of quote. Repeat the line.
Pause and wait for the others to laugh.
We can find that unity again. And the message said, end of message.
Laugh and read message, pause, wave hand. And now let's grab the latest Outsiders news. Well, what is going on, Rita and James, with the Liberal Party and misinformation? Last week, Peter Dutton, he should have been here on Outsiders. His advisors, for whatever reason, sent him on to Insiders, where he basically blew apart all the goodwill that The Voice got the Liberal Party, putting The Voice, thanks to The Voice, Liberals on the right side of all the arguments. But no, they had to blow it up on misinformation. Have a listen to what was said last week.
I think there's a bipartisan position in relation to this. We know that the companies, and we've seen some of the comments from Elon Musk overnight, they see themselves above the law, and it's a matter of enforcing the laws and taking action, giving the eSafety Commissioner further powers if that's required.
No! Peter Dutton should have been here on Outsiders saying, I oppose everything that the Labor Party are doing on misinformation. I oppose the way they are attacking Elon Musk. As the leader of the Liberal Party, of the coalition in this country, I stand unequivocally for freedom of speech because I believe the Australian people are adult enough to be able to watch a video of a criminal attack, alleged attack on somebody and make up their own mind about it, Rita.
It is an incredible misstep from Peter Dutton. It took the Liberal Party 10 months to come to the position they should have had from day one on The Voice. Let's not forget that. He has done a U-turn of sorts, not completely, but he should have been calling out the Albanese government cynically using an alleged terror attack to try to push through these illiberal censorship requirements. And it's just such an irrational position the Albanese government has that particular bit of footage needs to be disappeared, not just in Australia, but around the world.
And what is the logic? What is the logic before it? It's not misinformation. It's the truth of what happened, James, nor is it violent imagery. If you think that's violent imagery, I got some news for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, look.
I mean, it's violent, but there's a lot more violence.
There's a lot.
Exactly.
So here's the thing. Peter Dutton screwed this one up here massively because he did not simply back what should be the liberal free speech position. And instead he fell into a trap that was set for him by Anthony Albanese, who looked at this issue of this alleged sectarian attack in Western Sydney and said, ooh, if people are talking about this and some of the implications around that, that's not good for us. Let's find a new villain in Elon Musk and turn him into the bad guy. And you know what? Peter Dutton backed him in. That was the wrong thing to do. And the other thing, too, I mean, you know, talk about this whole thing. As you say, the actual vision, that's not misinformation. That happened, whether, you know, the nature of it is, you know, before the courts. But the fact of the matter is, what do you do? Take down footage of 9/11. 9/11,
Zapruder
Pearl
film.
Harbor, the Zapruder film of JFK. Oh, JFK, there's a lot of conspiracy theories around that film. Maybe we better take that down. There's a lot of conspiracy theories around 9/11. Maybe we should take that down. The Hindenburg, take that down because, oh, the humanity. This is the worst sort of nanny state impulse by the Albanese government here, pushing the same sort of we're keeping you safe buttons that they tried, that the government pushed all through COVID.
I say it's worse than that, James. This is like the Chinese government trying to stop that footage and disappear the footage of the tank man, the lone man who stood in front of those tanks.
Because it's politically inconvenient. That's the thing.
And if you want distressing footage that's likely to cause emotional harm, have you seen the footage out of October 7? Do we want that disappeared too? Do we want to pretend that didn't happen? This is just incoherent, irrational, cynical push by Labor and for the Liberals to give up their free speech principles, to fall into this trap. That wasn't exactly an artful trap. It was pretty obvious what was happening.
Gigantic mousetrap.
And just walk right into it like a fool. And you're so right. This should be in the Liberal Party's DNA. It should have been like The Voice, but on day one they should have said, what? We're going to give special rights to particular people based on nothing other than their race. No, that's not something that we can stand behind. They were all about the detail. Remember, for months and months, they wanted detail. Detail of what? The entire thing on its premise was rotten, as is this. This should just be in their DNA.
And the real problem here, and this is where the huge political misstep by the coalition, the real problem is Labor are managing to... They've never been able to define misinformation and disinformation. They're combating misinformation, disinformation. It's basically a circular argument. It says misinformation is information that we deem to be misinformation because it's not, whatever. The point is they've conflated, James, the idea of violent extremist imagery like pornography, etc., etc. That's what I think Peter Dutton, to give him the benefit of the doubt, thought he was talking about.
No,
but maybe not. That's giving him the benefit of the doubt. But yes, there is an argument, of course, to do with violence, extreme pornography, snuff movies, etc. That is not what misinformation and disinformation is done. But what Labor have done, they've managed to make it, it's stuff that's politically inconvenient for us. They managed to conflate these different things. And even we saw the ridiculous thing where it's been a big theme this week online, and I'll talk about it later on Clown Show, but up popped a bit of footage from last year where Albanese was defining misinformation as basically jokes about himself. We'll be talking about that later. So they've managed to conflate all this stuff. Meanwhile, misinformation, James, is lost in the fog. And the Liberals should be cutting straight through it and saying, this is what misinformation is, and we're not going to be banning it for X reason or Y reason.
There's a very simple definition, Rowan and Rita, of misinformation, and that is information that cuts against the narrative of the government of the day. And this is the trap that Peter Dutton has fallen into. This is the trap that a lot of Libs have fallen into here. They don't understand that by giving more power to this sort of, apparatus for censoring what people can say, because really it's all about controlling what you out there see and then think and then feel about things, because they don't want you feeling or thinking the wrong things, because they might make you have the wrong ideas or whatever, and that's dangerous. There's so much precedent for this too, During COVID, we found out that they censored more than 4,000 posts online, many of which were about things like where the virus came from, and that all turned out to be accurate. But they said, no, that's misinformation because it's not helpful to the narrative of the day. So there's precedent. We know how this goes. We know that this sort of thing in other countries is used against conservative and libertarian parties by left-wing parties. So this
in other countries, it's happening right here.
I know, but it is. But what I'm saying, Rita, is there's a global push on. There's a global push on. And
this
for
is
Albanese,
the Davos crowd. This is the World Economic Forum
to be falling into line with these people, it's very sinister.
We know Albo's going to fall into line with it, obviously. The problem is the Libs and the coalition falling into line with it. You must not. Handbrake, U-turn now. Get out of this. You are heading over a cliff unless you get back to free speech principles. This is The Voice all over again. Rita is 100% correct. The Liberals and the coalition must oppose misinformation and disinformation. Whatever government censorship of what you can and cannot see online, as I said, with the obvious exceptions, which is the classic free speech, and we don't want incitement to violence, we don't want extreme pornography, etc., whatever it is. But this is not what this is about. This is a politically motivated decision to take down something. Why would you take down that footage? Well, you can make your own guesses about why it is inconvenient for Labor and their electorates in the western suburbs of our major cities. That is what they're up to, and the Libs must oppose this now.
And just quickly, for those people who are a little bit simple, who bring up examples of, well, we're not free speech absolutists, we're not going to allow it. Well, no, of course not, because so many things that we've already mentioned are against the law. You can't put child exploitation stuff up. You can't put snuff films up. You can't put threats of violence or things that are going to end that. But there is already laws around these where you can prosecute people who are sharing that sort of vision. So let's not get mixed up here about what's happening. And for the Liberal government, because I think they are going to straighten up when it comes to disinformation, misinformation, but the fact that there are still so many of them backing the
Let's have a look.
Commissioner...
Let's have a look. Here's an example, folks, of how not to be the deputy leader of the Liberal Party. Have a look.
I'm for X obeying the law, and I'm not for the actions and the statements of our East Safety Commissioner being ignored. We back her 100%.
Fine. Go and join the Labor Party then. Go and join the Greens. Go and join the Teals. You do not belong in the coalition, which in its bones stands for free speech, not a government censor. And this is what this is, a government censor.
The problem is that, of course, let's not forget that this whole office of the E-Safety Commissioner was an innovation of the Liberals and the coalition under Malcolm Turnbull.
Yes.
So this is
another good reason to oppose it.
Of course, but this is also the thing here. This is where the politics of it come into play, because Peter Dutton has a great opportunity here to make a break with that sort of Turnbullite era of the party. You know, there's so many things that are hangovers from that, and you still see Paul Fletcher out there basically writing and saying, "Oh, well, it's okay. This is all part of it." No. This is actually, it's time for them to do an actual proper 180 on this and publicly own the fact that the party created this and they've realized that's gone in ways that they didn't foresee, whatever. Shut it down and say 100%. This is something that needs to be ended.
Paul Fletcher's just written, 1,000, 1,500 words in the Australian on the weekend.
Did you get through them all? My God.
And read every word of that piece, because it will make it crystal clear to you that he does not understand the issue. He has absolutely exposed his own ignorance and lack of knowledge about what this means. And let's talk about Susan Ley, please, because she is chronically wrong on just about every issue, and always in the wrong. Whether it's
Tell
Israel.
us what you really think, Rita.
Well, Israel. She's done a U-turn there. She's done a 180. The Voice. She was all for that until she wasn't, and then she was passionately against it. So many issues. When the gender wage gap report came with massive holes, massive inconsistencies in it, she was out there championing it and then pretending like it was gospel that we have to completely respect and not question. She is in the wrong party. She should not be deputy leader. She is a liability, and I'm telling you, it's going to blow up in their faces. Just give it a bit of time.
100%. Well, you've heard what we think. I tell you, the Libs can win the next election, but not if they go down this path, because what we've explained on the show before, we saw it on The Voice, and don't forget, we were the first people on air to be saying this about The Voice long before anyone else, that The Voice would lose because a 60-40 majority of Australians, and I reckon on many other cultural issues it's probably a higher percentage are conservative. But let's just say 60-40. And we've said before, if the Libs, the coalition, want to take every single cultural war issue, if you like, cultural issue, doesn't matter whether it's transgenderism, whether it's this free speech, whether it's nuclear, whether it's climate change, net zero, whatever it is, if the Libs go on the 60-40 side of the equation, they will win the next election. But on this, they have lumped themselves in with Albo, the Greens, Jackie Lambie. If you're on the same side as Jackie Lambie and you're opposite Pauline Hanson and Ralph Babette and those guys, you're on the wrong path, Libs. You're on the wrong path. Now, speaking of Libs and the former Liberal government, Scott Morrison, I know he's got a book to sell. That's great. We've all got books to sell. And so he's, got some publicity out there. But he's now I don't want to paraphrase, and I don't want to treat the topic insensitively, because what he's basically referring to is some kind of mental health or depression, or in his words, he found he got depressed to the point where he didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. Now that might be a bit of hyperbole to sell his book, or it might be the truth. If it is the truth, then I'm sorry, he should not have been Prime Minister. And if he had struggled to get out of bed in the morning to do his job, I remind you that people like Margaret Thatcher survived on 4 hours, legendary, of sleep, because she was so eager to get up in the morning because she had a nation to run, and stayed up late at night to do so. If the Prime Minister can't get out of bed in the morning, he shouldn't be doing that job. And in the middle of the pandemic, for Morrison to be struggling to get out of bed because he found the criticisms of the opposition and the media, people like ourselves, too much to take, well, I'm sorry, he should have stood down. I think it's unacceptable to now be going, oh, well, I was under terrible stress, I couldn't cope.
Well, he didn't step down. He appointed himself secretly to 5 different ministries. Yes. Was it 5, James?
Yeah, no wonder he was overworked. No wonder he was overworked.
That would overwhelm everybody.
Well, not only that, he also, while he was appointing himself to all those different ministries, he was also basically handing over responsibility for the pandemic to the premiers, who of course, then went completely nuts, particularly, of course, Dan Andrews, but also, Gladys Berejiklian here in New South Wales, South Australia, WA. I mean, come on, let's remember that nonsense. Let's remember Queensland. And so there was no actual sort of leadership at the top, again, to go back to those sort of liberal principles that we talked about, to say that, we should have some, respect for liberty rather than just locking people in their homes and ignoring. Let's remember, there was a whole pandemic plan on the shelf.
Yes.
Tony Abbott had worked on it when he was health minister, and we just ignored it.
Well, we had Bridget McKenzie just on with Andrew Clennell before, and she said the history will be kinder to the Morrison government than the electorate and everyone else has been. I think she's wrong there. She keeps talking about we got the country through the pandemic in great shape. No, we didn't. No. We absolutely
look at the budget that's going to come down in May.
We are all paying the price now of those reckless economic policies, the largest, just the printing money.
Just one which we'll talk about later with Alex Antic, who will be on the show, but the Supreme Court in Victoria has now found that the policies that the Victorian police had to their own members who were insisting on vaccine mandates and so on, the Supreme Court in Victoria has overruled that one particular case. But Rita and James are correct in that the shambolic management or mismanagement of the pandemic was because the premiers were out of control. They had all the money in the world they wanted and no restrictions on them and no leadership from the top. And that is my point. If he was incapable of leading from the top, he should have put someone in who was prepared to lead from the top. And that was to Australia's detriment that the Morrison government just let the premiers run around.
You say he let the premiers run, right? Yes, the premiers did as they wished. But it was really Beijing's model that we followed.
Yes.
We followed the Beijing lockdown strategy, just impose these draconian measures. You will eliminate the virus. Remember, we had elimination as a strategy for so long.
Yes.
Despite the fact, from the very start, we knew this virus was going to be endemic. It was going to be around forever. We ignored the obvious to pursue this craziness.
Well, and then we just said, let's just have Josh Frydenberg hit the go button on the money printing machine here. And so this is where we are now. We're about to have this budget handed down, in a couple of weeks' time. They're going to be dumping more money into all sorts of industries, whatever. But where we are now economically, we've got inflation that's sticky. We've now got talk of the RBA hiking and not cutting rates. We've got household income and standards of living that are slipping backwards at a rate of knots. The only thing propping up the GDP overall is a ridiculous hyperinflated immigration policy to cover up the fact that we are in an absolute real recession. And this is all largely due to the fact that we shoveled all of this money out into the economy, and now, of course, we're paying the price for it. You cannot just do this sort of thing. The economics were so clear at the time, but instead they said, no, we'll just scrap the pandemic plan. We'll go to the Chinese route. We'll pay everybody to stay at home, and nothing bad will ever happen. Well, I'm sorry. Here we are.
Yeah, exactly. And now Morrison is telling us he couldn't get out of bed.
If only there was.
Hang on. Oh, yeah. Would there have been a TV show with?
Maybe on a Sunday morning. I don't know. Insiders, no.
But instead of perhaps listening, they wanted to pull us into a Senate hearing and berate us.
and defame us in the Senate. Absolutely. Yeah, we were misinformation. Absolutely. Yeah, there you go. Now, interesting, the university protests, this anti-Semitic, pro-Palestinian garbage which is infusing university campuses around the world. We're not exempt. Look at this horrible bit of footage of kids chanting Intifada at Sydney University this week. And when I say kids, I don't mean students.
Intifada! 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 From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. 5, 6, 7, 8, Israel is a terrorist state.
So those little children are being taught to chant genocidal slogans about murdering Jews. That's what that phrase means, from the river to the sea.
We should ban that footage. Maybe we'll tell the Commissioner.
Yes.
Because I'm sure that footage is going to cause all sorts of distress and emotional harm.
Exactly.
And also some difficult questions for the Albanese government about what sort of...
Sarah Henderson is asking those difficult questions, Rita. Sarah Henderson is saying that Jason Clare and the Australian Jewish Association are backing Sarah Henderson up on this, that Jason Clare's inability to prevent or stop or suppress all this anti-Semitic behaviour we're seeing in our schools and universities means he should go. He should stand down.
Well, isn't it ironic, though, that, all of these campuses, and I'm going to talk a bit about this more later on in the program, but it's just ironic to me that all of these universities that, 5 years ago, if someone wore a sombrero to a Halloween party, everybody would lose their absolute ever-loving minds, are now going out and just basically being home to all sorts of lunatic pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian propaganda. Do you know that the head of Iran, Khamenei, tweeted in support of all the protests that are happening in the West right now? These guys are on the side of the Iranian theocrats. Well done, everybody. Take a bow.
Yeah.
They're literally chanting death to America, death to Israel in Farsi in America. They're having lessons where they're teaching people to learn these chants in Farsi.
Gee, Duolingo's gone downhill fast.
I mean, it is so crazy, but you can't wear a MAGA or even a Peter Dutton cap, if such a thing exists, at a university campus without every student calling you a Nazi and a bigot and a racist. But they are very happy to be openly anti-Semitic. I mean, you talk about irony, my God, that's weapon grade right there.
And again, where is Labor? As I keep repeating, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, or as blue as that background, Labor are no friend of the Jews or of Israel. Labor disappearing in action as usual.
Or the West, because what this comes down to, this is about hating on the West. So it's just simply the Jews and Israel are just treated as a synecdoche for the entire West. And so they must be opposed because the goal isn't, the end of Israel. The goal is actually the end of our Western liberal democracy. That's what Iran wants, and that's what these crazy lunatic Marxist kids want.
It's the same people. If there was a Venn diagram of these protesters you see across the US, UK, Australia, the overwhelming majority are the same ones who are marching for BLM or Anti-Australia Day here, marching for climate change catastrophe, the Extinction Rebellion.
We've got one of your...
It is all the same.
Anzac Day protests. We'll just quickly play that clip, if we may, of the Anzac Day left-wing approach to Anzac Day. Let's have a look. Rita?
Yeah, he's obviously making some very pertinent points there, whoever that is, my gosh. But it's not just lone attention seekers like that. We are seeing a phenomenon here where they are trying to lump Anzac Day in with Australia Day and everything else they find objectionable about the West.
They hate Anzac Day because it is the last sort of redoubt of national patriotism and pride on the calendar.
And the empire, colonial.
And the empire. And so they have to tear it down. They cannot stand it.
How long before the bulk of the media turns against Anzac Day as they have against Australia Day? Exactly. Because it's the media...
Did you see Peter Fitzsimons this week?
Oh, they will.
I did not.
Let's take a short break. After the break, Rita's reality check, and we'll speak to Billboard Chris. Who? Mr. Billboard himself. Yes, here on Outsiders. Don't go away. Back in a tick.
Welcome back. You're watching Outsiders with your hosts, Rowan, take that down, Dean, James, suppression order Morrow, and I'm Rita Panahi. Coming up, we'll be speaking to a man who became a victim of Australia's leftist activist e-safety commissioner and the one who put her antics on Elon Musk's radar. And yeah, let's talk about Julie Inman-Grant and her illiberal and outrageously political demands requiring X, formerly Twitter, to take down posts supposedly for our safety. It's not just a footage from an alleged terror attack in Western Sydney. Her takedown orders include one from a breastfeeding advocate, Jasmine Sussex, that said men cannot breastfeed. Well, of course they bloody well can't. And a post from our next guest, Billboard Chris, that misgendered trans activist Teddy Cook. Why is Cook, who is a UN advisor on trans and non-binary people, who posts about bondage, bestiality and taxpayer-funded sex changes, being protected by Julie Inman-Grant, who has threatened X with a massive daily fine of $782,000 if the posts are not removed? And now Karen wants to ban footage of this alleged terror attack from a Wakely church, not just for Australia, but the world. As Elon Musk explained, our concern is that if any country is allowed to censor content for all countries, which is what the Australian e-safety Commissar is demanding, then what is to stop any country from controlling the entire internet? We have already censored the content in question for Australia, pending legal appeal, and it is stored only on servers in the USA. And he is 100% right. Do we really want some bureaucrat from, I don't know, a corrupt third world nation or Canberra determining what is available on the internet? The Anthony Albanese government should be condemned for using an alleged terror incident to limit what content Australians can access, but instead of condemnation, it is winning bouquets from the bulk of the Australian media, which seems to be gagging for greater censorship, no matter how unreasonable. They were even cheering on Jackie Lambie's unhinged comments, wanting Elon Musk to be imprisoned and the keys thrown away. Let's have a look at how Nine covered this story.
First, X ignored a demand from the E-Safety Commission, and right now it's still refusing to comply with a federal court order to take down that graphic footage of the bishop's stabbing. The defiance of the company's owner, Elon Musk, is clear to see on his own page, launching a bizarre spray against Australia, saying if any country is allowed to censor content for all countries, what's to stop it controlling the entire internet?
What part of Elon Musk's very logical and reasonable explanation is bizarre? How can any government demand a piece of footage be banned around the world? The activist reporter wasn't done yet. She then, with a straight face, reported about a possible political exodus from the platform, all based on Jackie Lambie closing her account. But she failed to mention the Tasmanian senator's unhinged rants and repeated calls for Musk to be jailed for life. Now, that's bizarre, bordering on demented. Let's take a quick look at Seven's effort.
The mis and disinformation that spread quickly after the Bondi and Wakely stabbing attacks. Children most at risk.
Did I just hear Seven report we need greater censorship after the mis and disinformation that spread quickly after the Bondi and Wakely stabbing attacks? Talk about weapon-grade chutzpah. The misinformation and disinformation that did the greatest damage after the Bondi Junction attack was from Channel 7, which falsely named an innocent Jewish man as the attacker. Did they think we'd already forgotten all about that? Yes, the bulk of the Australian media has embarrassed itself this week by advocating for greater censorship. We've seen coverage that would make the North Korean media blush as supposed journalists declared war on Musk, X and the right of Australians to access content, from memes mocking Albo to that footage from a Wakely church. And it's important to note here that the victim of that alleged attack, Bishop Mari Emanuel, has provided an affidavit calling for the vision to remain on X. Bishop Emanuel does not want what happened to him to be used to curb free speech.
Noting our God-given right to freedom of speech and freedom of religion, I'm not opposed to the videos remaining on social media. I would be of great concern if people use the attack on me to serve their own political interests to control free speech.
If only journalists valued free expression as much as the bishop, and if only the Liberal Party did too. The opposition's position on this issue has been remarkably unprincipled and inarticulate. This is the Deputy Opposition Leader, Susan Ley, on Friday.
I'm for X obeying the law, and I'm not for the actions and the statements of our East Safety Commissioner being ignored. We back her 100%.
We back her 100%? It's good to see Peter Dutton belatedly perform a U-turn of sorts on the issue yesterday, but Susan Ley is not fit to be in the Liberal Party, let alone Deputy Leader. And let's not forget, it was the coalition, or to be more precise, Malcolm Turnbull, who appointed a leftist activist to the position of East Safety Commissioner. It took Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party 10 months to land where they should have been from the start on the race-based referendum. Let's hope they find their principles a lot quicker this time. Or they deserve all the mockery that's going to come their way, including this brilliant effort from Pauline Hanson's Please Explain team.
Hi, it's me, Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia. And I'm a big dumb clown. And me, Peter Dutton, the Leader of the Opposition. I'm also a big dumb clown. I'm not a clown. What is it, Anthony? It's this Pauline Hanson's cartoon series, making us look like clowns again. Well, that's preposterous. Why don't you just get them to take it off the air? Nah, that's impossible. It's on the internet. There's a way. Put some pants on and follow me. Where are we going? We're going to Karen's. Karen's? Who's Karen? Back in 2015, the Turnbull government launched Project Karen's, which established the office of the E-Safety Commissioner. Oh, so we put a Karen in charge of keeping the internet safe? Well, that's what we told the people anyway. But it's really all about controlling the internet, which is why we call it the Keep Australia Regulated to Enforce a Nanny State, Project Karen's.
Ew, I don't like that. Delete. And I don't like that. Delete.
Oh, wow! So that's the E-Safety Commissioner. Yep, real name, Julie Inman Grant, a disgruntled former Twitter employee with ties to the World Economic Forum. We pay her $450,000 a year.
No! Delete! Delete! Delete!
Whoa, so she could delete anything from the internet? Pretty much. She started just deleting this dangerous, harmful stuff, but now we just let her delete whatever she wants.
Misgendering? Delete?
Doing great, Julie.
Hey, I've got to forward you a post. I've got to send it to 10 people, otherwise I'll die.
Wow, she knows so much about the internet. Hey, Julie, have you seen this? It's the latest step of the incredibly popular Pauline Hanson cartoon series.
Pauline Hanson? Must delete!
Oh no, it's not working. Looks like satire's too powerful.
Well, why don't we just give her a little more government power then?
It's working, look! The video's disappearing! YouTube, gone. Facebook, gone. LinkedIn, gone. Well done, Albo. We've given Julie enough power to censor whatever she wants on the internet, and now we don't look like clowns. Oh, what's going on?
Why can't I delete?
Hey, it's still up on X. Why can't she delete it from X?
Ah! I hate X! I hate Elon! Put him in jail!
He's out of control! Stand back. She worked at Twitter, remember? She hates Elon Musk and his free speech agenda. Oh no, where did she go? Davos. How do you know that? I'm looking at the receipts right now. She just spent $40,000 on flights. Looks like she's going to use taxpayer money to set up a global online safety regulator that's going to take control of the entire internet. Well, I guess we should probably stop her, right? No, let's let her go. There's no way people are going to find out about this and make us look like clowns, are they? No, I doubt it, Dutton. There's no way this sort of overreach will gain worldwide attention. Yeah, I guess you're right, Anthony. It's not like X or Elon Musk himself will personally try and stop us or anything. Exactly. It's not like people really value freedom of speech and expression. Definitely not. And they'll blindly trust that their government's got their best interests at heart, especially after COVID. And it's not like they'll ever vote against our two-party duopoly anyway. What are they going to do, support a party like One Nation who actually stand up for Australians' freedoms? Yes. We'd really look like clowns then, Dutton. Yeah, absolute clowns.
Well, I don't think I've got a more perfect segue than our next guest. Earlier this month, the E-Safety Commissioner, yes, the Karen herself, ordered Twitter, to remove a post made by a gentleman, a Canadian, called Chris Elston, who goes on Twitter. He calls himself Billboard Chris, and he's well known. The tweet that he made was deemed by Julian Mann-Grant to be unacceptable. We might go into that. But more importantly, Chris is now in Australia, and here he is on Outsiders. Billboard Chris, Mr. Billboard, how are you? Thank you so much for coming on. You're down in Melbourne. Now, tell us first up what brought you to Australia. What is it like to be one of our E-Safety Commissioner's very first and major and most prominent victims of censorship? Are you that dangerous a person, Chris, that we can't hear your views on matters?
Well, I would never characterize myself as a victim. I think she's done a beautiful thing, actually, because all she's done is bring more attention to this, and I want to thank her very much. But I had this trip planned to Australia for several months, and it was perfect timing, really, for her to do this, because this has generated international media. And now Elon is even suing or taking legal action regarding that post of mine that was ordered to be taken down. So, yeah, it's just great timing. I'm in this beautiful city of Melbourne. It's amazing. I'm having conversations out on the streets with the citizens here in order to raise awareness about what I consider to be the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history, this business of trying to change the sex of children.
So give us a brief rundown on that. What's your take on that? I mean, tell our viewers.
Well, sure. So there's no such thing as a transgender child. They're called girls and boys, just as they always have been. And this is really an activist-led movement that has encouraged us to treat mental illness as though it's some new civil rights movement. And we are to believe that just because a child doesn't conform to really what are regressive and sexist stereotypes, that means the child is trans. So if a girl is a tomboy, does that make her an actual boy? If a boy is more effeminate, does that mean he's somewhere on the spectrum of being a girl? This is, of course, complete nonsense. And we should be telling our children they're beautiful just as they are. That's the positive message. When you tell a girl that she's a boy and you use he, him pronouns, what you're doing is you're telling her that she was born wrong and she needs to be something she's not. And I think that's a terrible message to send. It's basically a message of self-hatred, and we need to abolish this ideology entirely. But what we can do much more quickly is stop the medical abuse of these children where they're receiving puberty-blocking drugs, cross-sex hormones.
And so Chris, I'll just clarify, you're not a mental health expert, so that I'll just raise that with our viewers, that mental health is a separate issue to this. That's your opinion regarding mental health. But I think your point about the great medical scandal is to do with puberty blockers, to do with potential castration, removing surgery that has irreversible effects and impacts on young children who, I guess we could easily argue, and we've certainly argued it on this show often enough, should not be in a position of being able to make decisions that affect their sexual lives, years into the future. Would you agree?
Well, that's right. And you don't need to be a mental health professional to know that girls are girls and boys are boys. We've known this for all of humanity. And parents know their children better than anyone else. Yet what we have today are schools, counselors, social workers, basically trying to drive a wedge between the parent-child relationship. And here in the state of Victoria, for example, any adult on school grounds can deem a child to be a mature minor and bypass the parent. And they're hiding from parents that their own child is going by a new name and pronouns. Why are schools keeping secrets from parents? They're treating parents by default as though they are automatically abusive towards their own children. They're already mandatory reporters, whereby if they think there's abuse going on in the home, they need to contact the authorities. But this is the one issue in the world where they treat parents automatically as though they're going to be a threat to their own child. It's outrageous. This is an attack on parental rights, and we need to put a stop to this in its entirety.
James.
And Chris, I mean, you must have been heartened by some of the reports that have been coming out of the UK, also France and other countries, saying that, much of this medicalization that you describe is unnecessary and often very fraught. Are you a bit surprised that Australia seems to be so keen to shut down any discussion of some of these sorts of reports that are coming from medical authorities and legislative review committees and things like that in other countries?
That's right. All of my views are common sense, and they've all been backed up by every medical body in the world that has ever conducted a systematic review of all of the scientific literature. So in England, Dr. Hilary Cass, a lifetime pediatrician, not a politician, just conducted a 3.5-year review. She's released this 388-page report, basically backing up everything that I've just said, that puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, they weren't helping these children psychologically. So they're putting an end to that there in England. They're stopping it in Scotland, Finland, Sweden. We've seen progress in Germany, Norway, Denmark. Even the Academy of Medicine in France has said it's impossible to tell which of these children will grow up and out of their gender dysphoria. But we know historically from all the academic studies that were done before puberty blockers were given that the vast majority of these kids just outgrew this. This was a phase. But here in Australia, of course, they're led by the Labor Party right now, and all these left-wing parties are pushing this. No matter what evidence you present to them, they just double down and keep trying to do this more because they're not interested in truth, they're interested in virtue signaling.
Well,
Rita.
you are right. Australia is now an outlier. We are not even having a review of what's happening at these gender clinics, including at children's hospitals. What's your message to parents who are concerned? Because a lot of times this sort of craziness is led by certain activist parents who've got an ideology they want to push. But then there are just regular parents who see their kids impacted by this, whether they're seeing it on TikTok, whether they're seeing it in the schoolyard. What's your advice to parents?
So parents need to have these conversations at an age-appropriate level with their children, because if they don't, someone else is going to be having these conversations with them first. So when your kids know the truth, when they understand that they're beautiful just as they are, and these lies come for them, telling them that they might be trans just because they're a bit different, well, they'll have that shield of truth already with them. And overwhelmingly, the kids we see ending up at these gender clinics are on the autism spectrum. A lot of them have suffered sexual abuse or trauma. There might have been events in their family. These are kids in state care who are wildly overrepresented. It's all the struggling kids. So parents just need to really work with their bond with their children, because kids don't want to disappoint their parents, and be present with their kids. I would say the best thing you can do is read to your kids every night, because you improve your bond that way and you find out what was going on during the day. But just be aware and have conversations with the teachers and tell them you're not okay with them teaching gender ideology.
Rita?
And we're seeing now, we've got a lot of detransitioners who are coming forward. Some are launching legal action, but just also from reading the reports on what's gone wrong, these poor kids who are, as you say, a lot of them have got all sorts of other issues and are certainly gender confused, they're submitting to treatments that are leaving them sterile in some cases, loss of sexual function. I mean, how can a 13, 14-year-old possibly give informed consent for medical treatments that are going to leave them sterile as an adult?
Well, they can't. And never mind the 13 or 14-year-olds. This is being done to 10-year-olds, because puberty blockers are given, the scientific term for it, they're given at Tanner stage 2. So this is maybe a couple years before girls have had their first period. They're going to be 10, 11, 12 years old, these girls and boys. And of course, they can't understand what they're signing up for. The president of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, Marcy Bowers, this is a man who says he's a woman. He admits that literally none of the boys who started on puberty blockers at Tanner stage 2 have been able to have an orgasm as an adult. They're sterilizing and maiming kids and turning them into lifelong pharmaceutical patients. And we're to believe that this is love and helping them to be who they really are. Who they really are is a girl or a boy. And they don't have to conform to sexist regressive stereotypes. We should just tell them they're beautiful just as they are, because this whole ideology has been pushed by activists, not by science. And it's been a way to justify what some adults have going on by way of turning this into a whole worldwide movement. But it's all based on a lie.
Absolutely. And the tweet that you put out there was questioning the World Health Organization's experts on this very topic, and that was fairly concerning issues about who the World Health Organization, what processes they are putting in place and why and who they are listening to. And you had more to say on that. But we're just run out of time. But I think you've answered our question beautifully, Chris, about censorship. And the whole point about censorship, as the Rolling Stones and every rock group ever knew, get banned and you get popular. More people want to see what the authorities don't want you to see. And you're living proof of that. You're a rock star now. I bet you never thought you would be a rock star, but you're a rock star in Australia because they tried to ban you. The lesson is there for the authorities. Ban someone and more people will want to hear it, and because free speech is the most precious gift we have in democracies. Chris Elston, Billboard Chris, thanks so much and enjoy the rest of your time in Australia. Where can people see you if they need to see you?
Follow me on X or Instagram at Billboard Chris, and I also have a website, billboardchris.com.
Fantastic. Chris Elston, Billboard Chris, thank you very much. Coming on there. Lots more coming up on Outsiders after the break. Net Zany, Lefty Lunacy, Wackademia in a tip. Yes, Net Zany, and as usual, we were ahead of the pack, poking fun at the idiocy of net zero. Well, it looks like we're not the only ones any longer. Indeed, according to Jo Nova, you must read the Joanne Nova blog. She's fantastic, the work that Jo does there on the blog. But they're backpedaling now. Net zero is an unhelpful slogan, says the UK climate watchdog. So this character has come out and said, oh, that term net zero, it's not working for us, Rita.
That happens to every leftist term. Remember the term woke was their term.
Yeah. Yes.
It was cool until we all started sort of pointing out just how awful wokeness is, that it actually isn't anything it pretends to be. It's bitter, it's regressive, it's abusive. And now woke is a slur. The word progressive, they want to describe themselves as progressive, and now so
this has been going on even longer than this. I mean, I remember when I was a kid in the United States, the word liberal, they always said, oh, we're proud liberals. You know, this is the small L American thing. And of course, then that just became synonymous with every sort of crazy left-wing, let the criminals out of jail sort of policies, you know, that were making America a nightmare in like the 1980s. And so I think actually the great lesson for conservatives in this here is that mockery is such a ticket to success. All of these things on the left are so insanely mockable. They are logically inconsistent. You can make huge fun out of them. And I think conservatives sometimes fall into this trap of, you know, getting a little too self-serious about all of this stuff, when in fact, actually the thing to do is just have fun, because the left can't hit back on it. They hate being made fun of. So you just got to keep out there poking. It's great.
And also, James, the left puts such value in the control of words and the control of language. Once a label is on something, they think, ooh, that's what it is, you know. And they will use or demonise words based on labels. But if you're a conservative, you can take the language, you can laugh at it, you can mock it, you can send it up, and that's the beauty of humour.
And don't also, importantly, submit to it, because words matter. That's why this whole pronoun war matters, because it's about submission. And you're now seeing girls who are not LGBTQIA++++. They're just regular girls who identify as girls. But particularly girls, men are doing it as well, but it seems to be more prevalent amongst females, putting their pronouns in their bio. It is an act of submission. It's something they're doing, I'm sure, thinking, oh, I'm being inclusive, I'm being... no, it's not. You're not being tolerant. You're being a mindless sheep. You need to actually think about what you're submitting to and what that means, because if everyone did that, then you're the person who's not going to scream out your pronouns. You'll be called the bigot.
History, you know, last century is littered with your Pol Pots and your Mao cultural revolutions, where the first thing they do is they get the kids to chant these slogans, repeat these things. Have a look at New Zealand. We showed you earlier Sydney Uni, where they're chanting River to the Sea, Intifada stuff. Have a look at this bit of footage from New Zealand, where they're chanting about climate change, kids just being brainwashed.
Our young people deserve a healthy planet for their future, and that's what they're all demanding today.
When do we want it now?
We've managed to integrate this into all of our learning. We've used it to explore different artists. We've written about it. We've looked at science. So for us, this is part of the learning.
I'm terrified because I know I'm going to die from climate change.
I know I'm going to die.
I know I'm going to die from climate change. You're not girly, don't worry.
This is a great example of something. You know, Rowan, you mentioned Mao a moment ago, and I'm really glad you did. Because what we're going through right now is really a cultural revolution in the same sort of way that Mao led China through a cultural revolution. The whole point here is to colonize your mind, disorient you and your kids from your history, from your past, from your heritage, from reality, so that then they can replace it with their own new made-up reality, their own made-up heritage, their own made-up history in which you're the oppressor and you need to keep apologizing for it. This is just cultural revolution stuff. Mao said, smash the four olds, old thinking, old thought, old things. You know, this is the same thing they're doing here. It is straight out of the Mao playbook. And I'm glad we played that clip because it shows just how sinister it is to brainwash these young people, to have these young people, these lovely kids going out and thinking they're going to die because of the weather. It's child abuse.
And they're doing this in the name of education. Did you hear that? Oh, this is part of the process.
The learning.
No, you are teaching them absolute lies, these catastrophist lies. And these kids now, growing up in the most prosperous countries, peaceful countries, should be the happiest kids in the world. They're suffering from climate anxiety because some of these kids are in therapy because, like you heard from that poor girl, she thinks she's going to die from this. This is going to kill her.
And then they run off and chop off their breasts because they think that that's going to solve the problem because some teacher or other has told them so. But listen, even the kids, and this is from the States, waking up to the fact that they are not being educated. This was from a pro-Palestine demo last week, and the kids are going, well, we ain't being educated.
But these aren't kids. These are college kids.
Have a listen.
What do you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all of what NYU's doing.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure they're... Do you know what NYU's doing? About what? About Israel. Why are we protesting here? Palestine will be free! I wish I was more educated.
I wish we were more educated.
So
the awareness of youth, they actually realise, James and Rita, that they are being played.
Why is it also that when you watch all of these footage from all of these Palestine protests, they're all wearing masks? It's just amazing to me that, you know the COVID mask has just become the absolute symbol of every lunatic lefty protest.
Well, it is because it's the same illogical ideology that wearing masks outdoors in 2024, it just shows where your mind at. You're a moron. You have no idea about what is happening, of reality. And you know what? You're giving it out to those. They're adults.
Yeah,
they're at a university that charges around $70,000 US a year. So they're our brightest minds.
They are. Well, here are some of our brightest minds. I'll just quickly put it up on the screen. Queers for Palestine versus queers in Palestine. I'll leave that one with you to mull over. We've got to go back after the break. We'll dissect another scam from the left. And we've got Alex Antic in a tick. Hello, you're watching Outsiders, and thank you so much for watching Outsiders every Sunday morning. Today, Rita, batteries not included, Panahi, James, how much longer till this thing is charged, Morrow, and myself, Rowan, the Cobalt Kid, Dean. Last week, I mentioned the crazy cloud seeding scam whereby climate zealots are convinced they can play God and cool down the planet by spraying salt crystals into the air or exploding balloons full of toxic sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. Some conspiracy theorists claim that the severe flooding in Dubai last week was due to overzealous cloud seeding. Apparently 18 months worth of rain fell in 24 hours, and a meteorologist is now predicting future, wait for it, weather wars as nations decide to play God on each other's weather patterns. Quote, any time we interfere with natural precipitation patterns, we set off a chain of events that we have little control over, said the meteorologist. We shall see. In the UK media, there have been reports of excessive wet weather in the UK for the last 18 months, with crops being destroyed and a crisis in food production, dead lambs and decimated crops. Quote, we are going to have an appalling harvest this year, complained one farmer. The Guardian says There have been bad years, but this year has been particularly bad. You do wonder whether, wait for it, it's Guardian after all, you do wonder whether it is climate change throwing a curveball here, because we are moving to more and more extremes. Conspiracy theorists, however, are asking whether, rather than climate change, could it be the secret cloud seeding or chemtrails programs that are to blame for all this extra precipitation? Who knows? But then, in the middle of last week, out came this report by Mark-Wide Research into, quote, the UK cloud seeding market analysis, industry size, insights, statistics, trends. It even names the top 10 companies involved. Yes, 10 of them. That's big bickies. In the blink of an eye, yesterday's conspiracy theory is this morning's must-read marketing report. As a former advertising guy, I went straight to the SWOT part of the report: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And lo and behold, strengths of cloud seeding include potential for addressing water scarcity. Well, that's great. But then weaknesses include scientific uncertainties and variable outcomes. Sounds ominous. And the threats include unintended environmental consequences, ecological impacts, and public resistance. Now, as anyone who has lived in the Misty Isles knows, the last thing England needs is more rain. Obviously, if this technology can bring rain to where it is needed, terrific. But the scary part of all this is that if the climate change fearmongers who believe the world is rapidly boiling and who think they can and must play God and cool down the planet using these sorts of technologies, well, that's what we should fear the most. Meanwhile, and please forgive the pun, the wheels are certainly falling off what I call the EV scam. To investigate every scam, simply apply the big con formula: the setup, the hook, the tail, and the sting. The setup of this particular scam, as we know, is the idea that, again, in order to save the planet, we have to move to net zero emissions. Well, next comes the hook. And that's the idea that we can all drive around for free in our electric vehicles powered by solar panels on the roof. This is the exact hook that Albo promised us 3 years ago.
And the future in many ways can be here right now, be very clear, is solar panels on the roof charging your vehicle for free overnight. That's what it looks like.
Sounds like a grift to me. Then came the tail, the idea that governments could gently nudge consumers into buying EVs and help them by rolling out chargers across the nation, transmission lines. In Australia, this tale is being told repeatedly by our hapless climate change minister, Chris Bowen.
Even over Easter, as I've been around with family and friends and community members, people have been talking to me about EVs and thinking about buying an EV, but a bit worried about whether there's enough chargers. So it's important to remind people and show people that actually chargers are rolling out very fast across the country.
Yes, of course they were, Chris. Maybe it was the Easter Bunny who you were chatting to over lunch, because alas, globally, this tale is simply not living up to the hype. The UK Telegraph reported this week that almost 8 in 10 new electric cars are being sold at a discount as the industry reels from falling consumer demand driven by drivers turning back to petrol vehicles. The degree of discounting is also on the rise, with the average reduction now standing at a record 11%. It came as Tesla announced a string of price cuts in China, the US and Europe, following a slowdown in sales. Carlos Tavares, the head of major car brands Vauxhall, Peugeot, Fiat, warns that electric vehicles are unlikely to ever be universally popular among drivers. A CNN report quoted by Joanne Nova on her excellent Joe Nova blog reveals how Ford lost $1.3 billion in the first quarter of this year on EVs. Quote, Ford's electric vehicle unit reported that losses soared in the first quarter to $1.3 billion. That's a staggering loss of $132,000 for each of the 10,000 vehicles Ford sold in the first 3 months of the year. And no wonder Europeans are increasingly sceptical about the whole EV scam. Here's an electric bus in Germany being charged, as is so often the case, by a diesel motor. You can't make this stuff up. But all jokes aside, there are so many serious problems with EVs. Take this graph from a 2021 report by the International Energy Agency called The Role of Critical Minerals in Clean Energy Transitions, which I found on John Hinderaker's excellent Powerline blog, which may explain why EVs are much more expensive to produce than internal combustion vehicles, because they need such vast quantities of raw materials. That's at the top line. That's all the materials needed, like zinc, cobalt, nickel, manganese, and so on. That's all the top line there. For the electric vehicles, down below is the far less, 1/6 the amount needed in normal cars, is what is needed in normal cars. And here's another chart showing how China absolutely dominates the EV battery supply chain. Not to mention, China dominates 90% of the rare earth magnet market, another crucial component in EVs. Does any of this matter? A major market dominated entirely by China? What could possibly go wrong with that? I guess it all depends on how desperate you are to virtue signal your friends to your friends and your neighbours and maybe your boss, how you are doing your bit for the planet. But while you're feeling all warm and fuzzy, please do spare a thought for the welfare and working conditions of some of those individuals, an estimated 40,000 child slaves in the Congo cobalt mines alone, who have to dig out the cobalt to help you satisfy your desire to virtue signal and save the planet. Yes. I can't vouch for the accuracy of all the numbers in this next video, but just have a listen to this guy's estimate and calculations of the amount of sheer electricity required to turn this whole EV fantasy into reality.
I am just doing a quick little video here just to give people an idea of how much energy it takes to charge an electric vehicle. I'm at Electrify America. This is a 350 kilowatt station. I'm consuming roughly 137 kilowatts. It'll fluctuate. Sometimes I can go up to the full 350. But to put this into perspective, an average home consumes 1.25 kilowatts per hour. 135 kilowatts per hour, it's like the equivalent of 106 homes on the grid, just this one station. Now, if I was going to get the full 350 kilowatts like these can supply, that would be the equivalent of 280 homes. Now, think about all 6 chargers running at full capacity. That's like 1,080 homes on the grid. Just a little food for thought. It's things people don't realize, the amount of energy it takes to fast charge these batteries. It's a huge amount of electricity, and now you understand why the electric companies can't even supply that much power to one spot. It's like, think of 1,600 homes and how much copper and wire that would take just to supply that many houses.
As far as I'm concerned, the whole EV thing is a giant scam. And unfortunately, it can be a very dangerous scam, like when this EV bus in China spontaneously exploded, setting off a domino effect. Luckily, there was nobody on board those shuttle buses. Just imagine if there had been. But it's not just buses that spontaneously explode, EV cars too. But finally, here's one on your screen. Up they go. But finally, as with every scam, it's the sting that gets you in the end.
The European grid is going to have to be, about 3 times bigger than it is today, and the rate of addition to that grid is way below, what's going to be necessary. No country is doing the grid as fast as they should, not China, not the U.S., but we all need to spur each other on.
Spur each other on. More transmission lines across farmers' lands. More and more and more. This week, all those eager Aussie tradies that Chris Bowen was boasting about at Easter, about, well, they got the rather sobering news this week that the new F-150, the great EV ute promoted by none other than Chris Bowen as the answer, is yours for a snip, just over $250,000 per vehicle. I'm sure your local lawn mowing guy or brickie will be rushing out to buy one. Yep, as Robert Redford knew, when it comes to the big con, there's a sucker born every minute. Well, joining us now to discuss the renewed censorship push in this country coming from the government in the wake of the alleged Sydney church stabbing is Liberal Senator for South Australia, Alex Antic. Alex, great to see you as always. First up, we'll get into the whole censorship thing in a second, but I just want to quickly ask you about the great news about the Supreme Court in Victoria, how they've come out and basically overturned the Victoria Police, who were so stringent during COVID. They were taken to court and they basically come down on the side of the guy who was being victimised for not being vaccinated, correct?
Yeah, it seems to be, Rowan, and thanks for having me on. I mean, all of these cases have to be taken in isolation because they all turn on their own facts. They all turn on the legislative framework and the disciplinary framework in this case. This seems to be a case involving a police officer that refused the COVID vaccination and was disciplined, and he's gone to the Supreme Court and appears to have had that at least dampened down or overturned, which is good news. I mean, these decisions have to keep rolling. It's good to see the court starting to understand at least some of this stuff, which is great. And we saw this in Queensland with a similar sort of procedural decision in favour of some of the health workers up there. But everything turns on its facts. We've had a decision down here, I think, recently, not in favour of former Channel 9 newsreader Warren Treadray, who challenged his dismissal and was unsuccessful. So, look, I mean, everything turns on its facts. We can't get too carried away with these, but we'll
take the wins when they come along, Alex. James.
Now, Alex, I want to ask you about all of this stuff that we've had this week about misinformation, disinformation, the e-safety commissioner. There's been, frankly, a lot of mixed messages coming out of the party leadership this past week between Peter Dutton and Susan Ley. Does the Liberal Party stand for free speech?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's baked into the Constitution, it's baked into the We Believe statement, so of course it does. And I think what this has shown is how difficult this topic is. I mean, we all struggle with this. None of us want to see violent images or, distressing images online. But by the same token, it's my personal view that we have to be very careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I mean, if you look back at what we're talking about this uncomfortable incident in the church a couple of weeks ago. Not actually, as graphic as some of the things which are presently still online, by the way, and of course, important for highlighting a political point. I mean, if we'd gone back through the ages and had this power given in the last few decades, we would never have seen the murder of John F. Kennedy. We would never have seen the burning monk in Vietnam, all of which have significant power in terms of conveying a political message. So I'm very uncomfortable with bureaucrats having powers to censor. I'm very uncomfortable with them having more powers. I don't understand what more powers this office needs in order to do what they do. We're seeing the matter involving Twitter and X at the moment. That's in the courts, and I don't seek to comment on things that are before the courts, of course, but just in terms of the powers that are available to this office, I mean, I think they're quite draconian. I'm actually very uncomfortable with the powers as they presently are, let alone giving them any more powers.
Agree, Rita.
100%, and I think that's been demonstrated in the takedown orders that have already been submitted. This entire office was initially the Children's E-Safety Commissioner, and that seems to have disappeared. This was supposed to deal with child exploitation, having child porn online, all these issues that are becoming bigger because of everyone being online and having access to the digital world. But it seems to have veered off that fairly dramatically into a political office. And to have Susan Ley, the deputy leader, say the Libs back the Safety Commissioner 100%, that doesn't really leave you much room to move, does it?
Well, I mean, I can only speak for myself in relation to this. And what you've highlighted does show the very real bracket creep of bureaucratic power. We see it all the time. I mean, I'll give you another example. The Department of Home Affairs after Christchurch were given the power to refer matters between social media companies or posts that were put up by Australians back to social media companies for the very, perhaps real purpose of having graphic shooting material taken down. OK, we get it. What happens during COVID? We discovered this through a Freedom of Information application that my office put out. We discovered that not only were the Department of Home Affairs actively engaging with other external companies to sift through the posts of Australians, that they'd actually referred 4,200 posts from Australians back to those companies apparently in breach of the company's own terms and conditions. And many of them had been removed. Many of them were 100% correct. So yesterday's misinformation is tomorrow's truth. I think the other thing I just want to highlight here is let's have a look at the origin of the words misinformation and disinformation. These two words haven't entered the lexicon by mistake. This has happened quite deliberately. And what we're seeing is a bracket creep of censorship in this country and overseas. And isn't the timing interesting as we head into election cycles in the next little period? I mean, I wonder whether or not, and I'm talking mainly about the United States there, of course, but I wonder whether or not, we are now seeing a further form of bracket creep out of the bureaucracy into the mainstream.
James.
Well, indeed. I mean, Alex, if you look at the trend around the world, globally, in Europe, we've seen efforts to take down anything that criticizes the government of the day as being hate speech or misinformation. You look at what they're trying to do with criminalizing speech about the Alternative for Deutschland party in Germany, which is very popular. You see where this goes against the right. So isn't all of this, and between this and, what you uncovered quite intelligently about those posts being censored, isn't this then a reason then for the Liberals to say it is time to say we made a mistake with this e-safety commissioner, it's time to get rid of this, we have an AFP to enforce laws around child abuse material and, drug trafficking material and terrorist material? Because I note that there are preachers in Western Sydney who have alleged that we've reported on in the Daily Telegraph and elsewhere, their stuff is still up.
Yeah, quite right. I mean, we're seeing that there's any number of different examples of things that are still up. I mean, as an example, if you wanted to really, really protect the hearts and minds of young people, we would be doing something about the scourge of online porn in its entirety, by the way. I think the danger arises when you allow anybody, regardless of who it is, to pick and choose, because it is an enormous world out there, the internet, and it is just impossible for anyone to collect all of the offensive material. I mean, maybe that should be the case, but I certainly don't like the concept of having these enormous powers in any one individual person's hand. That's my personal position. Look, I think just in relation to the party's position, the party had, I think, opposed the misinformation and disinformation laws. These are the laws that the government is trying to conflate into this issue in order to sell them. There will be this bill that will return. It's a terrible piece of draft legislation. Let's wait and see. I mean, I think the position here is that we need to have a look at that bill. The leadership need to have a look at that bill and see what it looks like before making any conclusions about it. But I cannot imagine what sort of acidine, benign, generic version of that bill it would have to be for me to support it. I don't support anything of the sort when it comes to giving bureaucrats more power.
Well, there's also, Alex, a huge, I think, political problem here. You've got the Liberal coalition being seen in the same kind of picture as Jackie Lambie, Anthony Albanese, the Greens, and then over there on the other side you've got One Nation and Ralph Babet. I think you guys need to cross onto the other side, because this is an argument that, like The Voice, that everyday Australians can grasp immediately. They don't need to look at the legislation. They get it. You're trying to censor me or you're not trying to censor me. The Liberals, the coalition, must be the party of freedom of choice, in my opinion, and they must be seen to be doing so. And the rewards of being seen to be so will be a victory at the next election. If you are seen to be on the right side, as you were on The Voice, would be my opinion. Just very quickly, the anti-Semitism we're seeing on campuses, Jason Clare clearly isn't up to the job. Labor should be that's where they should be focusing their efforts at the moment. Why have we got a generation of children and young students rushing around supporting the genocide of the Jews in Israel? I can't understand it. Where is the government on that issue?
Well, it's a good question. Just as I came here today, I saw yet another protest. I saw the flags of Palestine flying, not a single Australian flag, I might point out, which seems to be the theme coming out of schools. I mean, look, I don't know the answer to that except to say that it's a cultural trend. We're now seeing the long march through the institutions, having made it all the way through the schools to the universities to the corporate sector and back into politics, and it becomes a full circle. The education system has to be looked at. This is something that we need to take very, very seriously into the next period. I'd like to see it being pushed immediately, because we're losing generations of kids to cultural self-loathing. I mean, kids are being taught effectively in many instances to grow up
Alex,
hating their country.
It's worse than that. It is incitement to genocide, and that is against the law. That's my point. We have limitations to free speech, and one of which is incitement to death, murder and violence. And from the river to the sea and other such chants, which these kids are being taught to chant, is an incitement to violence, and the law should be stepping in. Thanks, Alex Antic. Always great to chat to you. Keep up the great work there, and we want to see the coalition going against the misinformation and disinformation, voting against it. After the break, James's Donkey Vote. We'll speak to Israeli author activist, the great Noah Tishby.
Welcome back to Outsiders. James Morrow here, as always, with Rita E. Danger Commissioner Panahi and Rowan Suppression Order Dean. Well, the past week has seen some pretty extraordinary scenes on college campuses across America and around the world, where mostly peaceful protests have kicked off to urge mostly peaceful solutions to the intractable conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. And I have some breaking news out of Arizona, where at Arizona State University, the administration, local cops have found a solution. They have decided on the genius move of letting frat boys take down the Intifada encampment, which seems like a real win-win to me. Have a look.
We've got the white frat boys throwing away protesters' belongings, and we've got the pigs in brown doing nothing about it, although we are being forced off campus. Pigs in brown.
How good is that there? And they did not sound too happy about it. But you know what I say to that? Hard cheese. Because, I mean, we have to talk about these, as I said, very peaceful protesters. Check out the peacefulness of this person, Kaimani James, who is one of the leaders of an ongoing protest against Israel and, well, basically the very existence of Jews at New York's prestigious Columbia University.
And so, be glad, be grateful that I'm not just going out and murdering Zionists. I've never murdered anyone in my life, and I hope to keep it that way. I genuinely hope to keep it that way.
Gosh, wow. Well, anyone who has a clue as to what that person's pronouns are, please let me know, courtesy of this station. Oh, sorry, wait, Kaimani has told us themselves.
I'm Kaimani James. I use he, she, they pronouns.
They, all of them.
All of them, he, she, and they. And here's a little look at Kaimani's reasoning in all of this.
And so, if we can agree as a society, as a collective, that people, some persons need to die if they have an ideology that results in the death of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, if there are people like that who exist, shouldn't they die?
Well, I know. I mean, look, frankly, if she was talking about killing commies, we might be okay with this, but no, this person is talking about Zionists. And yeah, I think we know what that's code for, who they think deserve to die. Now, I know that Australia's Karen Commissar Julia Inman-Grant would probably rather that clip was censored, not because of the speaker's pleas to violence, but because it might hurt social cohesion if people were to find out what the seemingly Israel-hating radical left are all about, because the fact of the matter is Kaimani's death to the Jews, Zionists' attitude is rife among the protesters we are seeing in the U.S. and, again, increasingly in Australia. Also at Columbia, of course, this week there were calls to burn Tel Aviv to the ground. Have a look at this. Hamas, Hamas, we love you. Yes, that's really classy stuff. Meanwhile, at Yale University, prestigious Ivy League, protesters were seen preventing Jews from entering the university. Again, shades of Vienna in 1938. Plenty of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine flags and banners have also been on display around the country, too. So much so that no less than Iran's supreme leader tweeted his support for the protests. Oh, and it goes without saying that the general racism of the radical left has been on full display as well. My favorite bit is this clip, check this out, of a white woman telling another white person to go away because guess what? They don't like white people.
You're just a white person. You're a white person. Get out. We don't like white people. Free Palestine!
So, what do we say about all this? Well, I mean, obviously, these protests, they can't go on forever, and at least at certain campuses, the cops have moved in to end these illegal occupations by idiots protesting what they call an illegal occupation. Irony much? And yet, even if the protests stopped tomorrow, there would still be the underlying question of why is the intersectional progressive radical left, which loves alphabet pronouns and diversity and inclusion, so keen to make cause with and take the side of, take the head from ruthless theocrats who would whip women for not wearing headscarves and chuck gays off of buildings. I mean, it's insane. This goes beyond anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, of course. Israel seems to be hated not just for its Jewishness, but also for its success and the fact that it is on the front line of Western civilization on the border of Islam, which stands, of course, implacably opposed to the West. Thus, very intersectional pronoun people like the one we saw at the beginning of this segment can get on the same side as people who would normally murder them in a heartbeat. The radical left and radical political Islam seem to have made a common cause temporary alliance against the same enemy. And the crazy thing is, both sides want the end of the West, and both naturally assume that their vision will triumph. Now, let's hope, as Henry Kissinger once said about a different conflict, they both lose.
Thanks, James. Well, joining us from the US with the latest on the war in Israel and the surging anti-Semitism James has just been speaking about here in the West is Noah Tishby, activist and author, whose new book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew, is out now. That's a must-read, Noah. I'll be rushing out and getting a copy of that, and I urge other people to do so. Let's have a listen to Benjamin Netanyahu talking about what's been happening on college campuses and so on. Have a listen.
That's not new. We've seen in history that anti-Semitic attacks were always preceded by vilification and slander, lies that were cast against the Jewish people that are unbelievable, yet people believed them. And what is important now is for all of us who are interested and cherish our values and our civilization, to stand up together and to say enough is enough. We have to stop anti-Semitism.
So Noah, we are, as I'm sure you are, horrified of what's going on US campuses. Similar things are happening here. You know, the beautiful Sydney University, we had little kids chanting for intifadas. It's really horrific. Give us your thoughts on how this has happened and how, more importantly, what do we do about it?
First of all, thank you so much for having me again. It's always a pleasure to visit with you. So what is happening right now on college campuses in America and around the world is not happening by accident. It is happening by design. This is a conclusion of a coordinated and well-funded campaign that has been waged against the West and against Israel for over 30 years. So what Israel's enemies, and the enemies of the West really, the people and the entities and the countries that do not like democracy and anything that we hold dear, what they have concluded is that they're not going to be able to take Israel down militarily. And they've shifted the gear and shifted their plan to taking Israel down geopolitically, to basically delegitimize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. And they've been doing this for over 30 years in academia and on college campuses. We know about this. We've known about this for a very long time. Their plan was to make Israel toxic, to literally turn Israel toxic, because Israel is on the front line of a worldwide war in the Middle East against radical Islam. And they need to take Israel down in order to move to the West. And that is one of the things that we've been trying to tell the West for a very, very long time. The way they did it is to use age-old anti-Semitic tropes that everybody had kind of heard for thousands of years. Every Jew had heard for thousands of years. So you take out the word Jew and you put the word Zionist, and it's all clear. You can do whatever you want. So what we say about anti-Semitism is that it's not simple racism. It's a shape-shifting conspiracy theory. And it has shifted throughout the generations every time it changes a little bit. And in the past few generations, it had shifted to anti-Zionism. And this is nothing short of a plan to move forward jihadi ideology in the West. And we all need to be extremely careful, because the Jews are first, and then Israel, and then the rest of the world. So we're standing here saying we need to fight this evil with all our might, because this is literally a war against every value that we love in the West.
Noah, what does it say to the Jewish community and to the wider American population when you've got Joe Biden cozying up to AOC this week? Now, it was for Earth Day, but there's a lot of other people he could have had there for Earth Day. He chose to have her, was cozying up to her, was saying, he needs to listen to her more. And we all know where she stands on this issue. She's been one of the very few Democrat politicians who's been openly supportive of these protesters, even as they've got more violent and more anti-Semitic.
Well, I'm never going to be supportive of the squad in any way, shape, or form. I believe they're a fifth column of jihadi ideology in America. I think what they say is extraordinarily dangerous. Every single one of them needs to be defeated at the polls, and I certainly hope that we can do this. So I'm not a fan of that at all, but honestly, we've got bigger fish to fry right now. The way this coordinated effort is happening on campuses, it's a real problem, because it's also divided by age. The older generation is this in America, and normal Americans and normal Australians are looking at it going, what on earth are they doing? They see that it's violent. They understand jihadi terrorism. They understand the jihadi culture. They were around when 9/11 happened, so we know who Osama bin Laden is. But the younger generation that are getting their information, their news, and all their knowledge from TikTok, they have no idea. So literally right now, Zionism had turned into a curse word. Zionism, which is literally Israel's right to exist, that's it, is now been presented as a movement that necessitates the genocide of Palestinians. And that is not just not true, it's literally a blood libel, because people are convinced now that it is true, in the same manner that they were convinced in the 1500s that Jews are using the blood of Christian children to make their matzahs. It's exactly the same thing. So we have anti-Semitic tropes that are rehashed today and are causing all this violence on college campuses. And the young generation don't understand that their minds have been hijacked with the nefarious forces that are going to, as you said, to that person who threatened to murder Zionists, he would be the first one to go if the jihadi get their will. And he will be the first one to be thrown off the rooftop.
Absolutely, Noah. But I want to just go back to this university thing, because I have found this absolutely fascinating, what has been going on. How much of this phenomenon do you put down to the rise of a new sort of Marxist interpretation of the world, where everything is about power and victim relations, and where the Palestinians become somehow the poor victims in this whole equation and therefore must automatically be supported? And how much of this is due to the fact that countries like Qatar have dumped billions and billions and billions of dollars into universities building buildings, endowing foundations, endowing professorships, endowing chairs of Middle Eastern studies, all to create a narrative that is supportive of their ideology, not Israel's or the West's.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive. It's obviously the perfect storm of all of this convergence happening right now in America. There's no doubt that, look, here's what had happened. The goalpost had moved. The terms of kind of like the how we see reality have shifted. And this Marxist, as you said, ideology and this concept of seeing the world through the oppressor and the oppressed and through melanin in the skin. So it used to be about merit, about the culture, the content of your personality, even about class, about money. That's no more the case. It's now about melanin in the skin and oppressor and oppressed. And once you put when you look at the world through that parameter, the Jewish community doesn't fit. We don't fit in that. And it's very interesting that these kids on college campuses, they think they're speaking truth to power. They think they're taking down the patriarchy. They think they're doing the best thing in the world and something that is new and exciting. Yet they're rehashing age-old anti-Semitic tropes and picking on the smallest minority in the world that has always been picked on. So it's a little ironic that they're even doing that without understanding what it is that they're doing and not understanding that they really are the useful idiots in the West that are promoting an ideology that is out to get them.
And just very quickly, Noah, before you go, you're a great role model for Jewish kids. What's your advice to those kids who won't wear their star or are feeling threatened at university? How can they take inspiration from you?
Well, first of all, never take your stars off. Never, ever, ever back down. Never. I'll tell you, here's the thing, right? It's a tough time for the Jewish community, for the Israeli community, for the pro-Israeli community. It's a tough time to be a Jew. However, we need to look at what's happening right now through the prism of 5,000 years of Jewish existence. And we need to look at it through the prism of every few generations. It is Passover now. Every few generations, somebody comes out to get us. Every few generations, there's somebody that's looking around saying, I don't like what's happening in society. It's the Jews. And throughout history, not only did the Jewish community survive this, we thrived it. So if I was betting, I would not short the Jews. I would definitely
Fantastic.
This one too. So that's what I would say to every single Jewish kid that's watching this right now. Be loud, be proud, and know that we'll be okay.
And what great words. Noah Tishby, always great to chat to you. Thanks so much for coming on Outsiders from LA there. Back in a tick. Clown show. Yes, Canberra. In a tick. Roll up, ladies and gentlemen. It's the freakiest show in town. It's the Canberra Clown Show. And wow, what a stunning solo performance from last year, shot to prominence online this week, starring the #1 clown in the country, none other than Al Bozo himself. Have a listen closely.
Media platforms have a responsibility to make sure that misinformation isn't got out there. I noticed today, for example, on the way up here, they've removed various sites that were up containing fake images of myself superimposed on other people. That's the sort of thing that is going on social media. Social media has a responsibility to do the right thing here.
My goodness. So was the Prime Minister referring to those sort of pictures where you cut out someone's face or head and put it into a different picture? Who on earth would do such a thing like that? Oh, hang on, we've been doing it every single week right here on this show since the beginning of the year. Yes, Chris Bowen's face superimposed onto the head of a clown. Penny Wong's face superimposed onto the head of a clown, and so on. But to the uninitiated, what on earth is the Prime Minister actually talking about? Well, it sure sounds to me like he's talking about memes. And what is a meme? It is basically a funny visual online image with a caption that gets replicated or adapted or copied for humorous purposes, or where politicians or celebrities are concerned to poke fun at them. This is the original Abbey Road Beatles cover, which would then get copied time and time again, things like that. So it becomes a meme. There are some clowns on it in its own right. But most memes are simple visual gags that then get refit for purpose. The good ones going viral, such as this distracted boyfriend meme, which has been repurposed 1,000 times. You'll have seen it with different, often highly amusing captions about the three characters involved. That itself is a version of an earlier distracted girlfriend meme. But it sure sounds like, as far as our Prime Minister is concerned, these funny memes are misinformation, and social media companies must do the right thing and take them down. I'm glad we finally got Labor's definition of misinformation out there. Basically, anything that makes you laugh. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not having it, not a bar of it, and nor should you. So, in the interests of providing an invaluable community service in the name of preserving our larrikin democratic rights, allow me to take you through a handful of those memes that it would appear Mr. Albanese believes big bad social media should not allow you to see. In this meme, which only had just over 100 views, but clearly deserves more, the Prime Minister's face has been superimposed on top of a chubby kid who's trying to do up his trousers. I'm not quite sure what the illusion is there or political message, but it's rather well done, don't you think? Particularly note the goofy expression on the Prime Minister's face. You can't fake that. Indeed, the same goofy expression has also been used in a different meme, this one in which several elements have also been added, including a gigantic pair of clown shoes and an ABC and a Guardian logo there, and a caption which reads, "I'm going to fine Twitter for spreading misinformation." There you go. Picking up on that theme of misinformation, another meme, a more complicated one this time, featuring all sorts of characters in a kind of dystopian 1984 scenario. From left to right, you've got Chris Bowen, looking suitably ridiculous as always, the E-Safety Commissioner there, Julie Inman-Grant, then the PM centre stage. Next to him, ooh, this is not good, Peter Dutton, who for reasons that baffle me is not doing his job and opposing Albo's misinformation craziness. Then there's Jackie Lambie, Tanya Plibersek, and so on, with the caption, Ministry of Truth, self-evidently an Orwellian reference there. If I were Peter Dutton, just as an aside, I would be very, very concerned about being portrayed keeping company with this lot. In a similar vein, we have Albo redone to look like a North Korean dictator. Obviously a humorous exaggeration of his misinformation and disinformation policies. No meme fest, of course, would be complete without a version of the hapless Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Heroes. Albo almost looks too real in that one. Next, we have a couple more joke spoofs. Albo as Joseph Stalin, using the famous picture. Then there's this one, a spoof of Charlie Chaplin's brilliant movie poster for The Great Dictator, which was, of course, Chaplin's own spoof on Adolf Hitler, with a clever use there of Elon Musk's X. That's quite funny. Someone called Jack the Aussie has gone for a more over-the-top approach, sticking Albo's head on top of some bizarre Sam Smith fashion outfit. Quite funny, with the caption, "We must stamp this out. Parody has no place in our cultural landscapes." Yes, that's quite good. More crazy fashion memes in the next one. I'm guessing this is some kind of commentary perhaps on transgender issues. It's had 63,000 views, so that's pretty impressive. In this meme, seen by some 15,000 people, the humorous approach is to put the head of the Prime Minister on an Action Man doll and then change the caption there to "lack of Action Man." Get it? Presumably a satirical comment on the Prime Minister's unique approach to things like youth crime in Alice Springs or delivering his promised $275 cut in electricity prices. On a lighter note, and with the added pun on the word wonka thrown in for good measure, in this meme we clearly see Anthony Albanese in the starring role from a popular children's movie. And then there are now an avalanche of Albo memes over the weekend, all online, which you can see seems some things can be made in Australia after all, like creative memes. But wait, this is the official Labor Twitter account during the last government full of memes of Scott Morrison's face being superimposed on other images from famous movies like Liar and Dumb and Dumber. Did Albo want them taken down? Hypocrisy, thy name is Labour. Anyway, let's leave the final word to Albo himself. Or is it him?
Media platforms have a responsibility to make sure that misinformation isn't got out there. I noticed today, for example, on the way up here, they've removed various sites that were up containing fake images of myself, superimposed on other people. That's the sort of thing that is going on social media. Social media has a responsibility to do the right thing here.
Hyperbole, extreme exaggeration, as pronounced by Julia Gillard, hyperbole. Now, Karine Jean-Pierre, everyone's favourite White House intern. No, she's the press secretary. So there
she's
you
the
go.
press secretary.
There you go.
Very senior
Well, this
role.
is an amazing story, guys. I love this out of the States. The New York Post did some great research, and they found out that, well, no surprise, Karine Jean-Pierre is not up to snuff. And you've always seen her there. She's there with her binder of stock answers and saying, well, let me just say this. And she doesn't answer any questions. And she's a terrible, terrible person for the job. The problem for the White House is they want to move her on, except that she's black and a woman and a lesbian, and so therefore she ticks the diversity trifecta. They tried to get friends of her to say, Karine, why don't you move on, get a gig at CNN or something would be great for her career. But she's not moving. She's stuck. This is where diversity and equity and inclusion gets you people. You wind up with people like KJP who you can't stand.
And of course she's not going to go anywhere.
No,
Why would she? Why would she?
I can see her hosting her own show on MSNBC.
Oh,
They've got people way less competent than her.
With 47 viewers.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't matter. She'll be on a multi-million-dollar contract. Why not?
Now, Rita, while we're in the States, tell us about US cigarettes, bans on menthol cigarettes.
Oh, this is hilarious.
What's
So
going
the
on?
Biden administration was hell-bent on banning menthol cigarettes, but there's an election coming, and guess who really likes menthol cigarettes? The black community. So they have just done an inexplicable backflip, and you can read this a couple of ways. You can say, well, they did this to save lives for public health benefits, and black people disproportionately smoke menthol cigarettes, and now they're not doing it. Do they not care about black lives?
They're
Black lives I'm asking the questions. But can we have a quick look at this footage? This is the best. This is an economics professor being led away in handcuffs after this protest, but she's admitting to her crimes as she's being marched away.
Hit him on the head very lightly to get his attention, and they grabbed me, threw me to the ground, and arrested me.
You cannot hit police officers on the head, even if it's lightly. She's admitting to it as she's being
Here's
led
how you
away.
deal with police. Here's how you deal with students. Have a quick look at this. This is what we should be doing at Sydney Uni.
You guys are shouting for intifada? You know what an intifada is? What is it? What is an intifada? You guys are proud of shouting for intifada? Yeah?
Yeah, they didn't even know what intifada was. They're all doing the protest. This is what's happening, folks. This is what we've got to put a stop to. That's it for Outsiders. We'll see you next Sunday at 9 a.m. Thanks a lot.